Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's Marcus from TCG Discussions, back at it with another discussion video today. We're going to talk about the top decks that you should be looking to play into Nats, as well as my opinion on the number one deck in the game right now and why you should probably be taking that to Nats in general. And I also want to talk a little bit about the tournament results to kind of support that. So that's going to be a decent chunk of the video. But before we get into anything, I just want to give a huge shout out to everybody, both the subscribers as well as the people who've viewed my Sakazuki guide. It's been, as a small content creator that doesn't make any money off of making videos like this, I feel very blessed and very fortunate to have as many views on that guide, and as well as the responses for just what you guys see in Sakazuki, as well as the feedback that I've gotten about the things that I see and how I approach the deck. I just want to give a huge shout out to all you, both the subscribers and everyone who's commented, for making it a really great video, having that TCG discussion, which is the name of the channel, and just providing me with your insights as well. I think it's just awesome, and it's one of the reasons why I do this. So I hope your new year is going off really amazing and you're, achieving all the goals that you want to. And I just want to thank you all again for the support and the feedback and comments. I really appreciate it, and just thank you. Just thank you. So getting into the video, let's start off with what my view of the number one deck in the game is and the support for that. And I think it's Enel at this point. I don't think that there's really an argument to make that it's Sakazuki. And I think that if you're going to Nats and you want a deck that's solid with the most solid game plan per se, to approach the meta across the board, it's Enel. So starting off with OPO5 meta, I talked in my tier list video about how Enel is basically a gatekeeper, just because it really challenges your opponent to put up a board, as well as a kind of kill turn craft structure that can be really problematic, because at the same time, if they high roll with Holy, they can basically put you in a position that is extremely bad at any point. So Enel just basically has a lot of really good things going for it, while simultaneously presenting a huge force to your opponent to deal with. In terms of why it's good against Sakazuki, it goes wide and tall, which is just basically a pretty big issue. And let me kind of get into play curvature with Sakazuki and just kind of explain why Enel is just so problematic as a leader. So let's say they on curve see an Holy, and you need to out both of them. Your turn, especially if curve is taken from you, so going into their second turn, if they play Holy, and you'll have 5 Dawn at this point to do that. The basic only out to the both of them is Lucci coupled with Ice Age. There is not another way, I think, even if, because if you use Leader Swing, -1 cost the dog, the Holy. There isn't another 1-drop card you can play that next to the Lucci that's going to out both of them. So basically you're going to get value out of those attacks. If they have 6 Dawn, it's a little bit different. If you play Holy and they are on curve, they can double Great Eruption, cycle into 2 different cards, and set up for Lucci easier, because they've just used 2 cards as well as the cycle from their turn to be able to get the 3 in there for Lucci. Especially if they saw curve for Brenu, it's going to be pretty problematic. So there's a little bit more wiggle room, but at 5 Dawn, the only way to do that is to basically have Ice Age and Lucci to get rid of both. And if not, they're going to get value. Also, Enel plays this little bit of a starve game, which for the record is not very good against Sakazuki. With Sakazuki, like when you play Enel, if you play against Sakazuki, if you have value in your card's presence on the board, you essentially make your opponent get rid of the board through not attacking your life, right? So in my opinion, people are not aggressive enough, and identifying like the turns to be aggressive, I think sometimes is just giving your opponents too much to work with if they don't like actually attack with the cards that are on the board. I mean, I find it to just be mind-boggling, the idea of like having like an 8-drop Katakuri, an 8-drop Katakuri, and a Yamato, and somehow saying that like I'm gonna wait one more turn to attack with anything and just give Sakazuki another turn to out the board. I know sometimes people feel like there's nothing really they can do about it. Like even if they out won, that's not a big deal. But that's still an 8K pressure card that you didn't, or a 9K pressure card that you just literally played to the board, did what you did with it, and then didn't have any like pressure value to the hand. And Sakazuki has a low counter hands, like a low amount of counters. So that's like something you should take advantage of, because the more time they to build up the resources and defenses, the easier it's going to be for them to roll you over in the end. Not being aggressive, when I play Sakazuki, when I see somebody who's not being aggressive against me, I just flatten them, because the only thing that you did was play 2 cards, got 0 value out of them, and then I in turn just remove those cards, and now you have to redo it again. And yeah, if you double Ohm Holy them, you are for sure going to, if you're an L, you're pretty much going to win the match right there on the spot. Like there's just not a lot that can be said or done. For Sakazuki first off, Sakazuki wants to start playing blockers, preferably on their 3rd turn. Like, for example, I would love to have like a Hina, for example, in my trash, and then play like Rebecca, play Hina, so I get 2 bodies, and then like Great Eruption a card, not Great Eruption, Hound's Blaze a card, in order to remove a card off the board, right? That would be ideal. It's going to get way more insane when we get the card that's basically Rob Lucci, but a 2-cost card. At that point, it gets the Ohm Holy combo starts to fall off a lot more. So OP06, Sakazuki's going to be super scary, especially with like Gecko Moria as the top end. You basically generate the same value out of Gecko Moria as you do with 10 Kaido, except for instead of getting it to hand, you get bodies, and it's cheaper. So you're going to really have quite a force of attackers that can be generated to the board, coupled with a mass amount of removal, depending on the combination of cards they wish to play. So it's something that I'm super looking forward to. But the current Sakazuki meta that we have right now with Enel and Purple Luffy and everything else, I really think that Enel is the best, and I think the tournament results that I'm going to talk about here really kind of prove that. So when we talk about Enel, it has won a PPG event, an online win-a-box event. It has won LA. It just won the Heart Pirates event, and that's 4 of the reportable tournaments from the different tournament reporting YouTubers that I've seen. And then there's the European tournament where Sakazuki flattened the meta. Like that meta representation is exactly what everybody expected it to be. Lots of Sakazuki, with Sakazuki winning, and lots of Sakazuki taking up top spots. But over here, right, that's not really the case. There's a lot more yellow diversity, and I know in Australia, not including any of these Australian events that have occurred, and I don't really know much about that, so if you do, please leave it in the comment section down below to see how yellow's doing in Australia, or Sakazuki, either one, and what's winning and what's dominating, or what's like the good proof for you know, their meta state over there. But in general, with the 5 tournaments that I just listed, Enel has won 4 out of the 5, meaning it has an 80% win rate. to talk about conversion rates for a second, I'm going to use the Heart Pirates online tournament because it's the most recent one. So by this time, people not only have the cards, whether they be expensive, blinged out, or what, I don't care. That was somehow an excuse at the beginning of OPO5 when literally you could get Rob Lucci for like $1, and then you could get the Borsalinos for like dirt cheap, and Rebecca was like $5 or $6 as like the regular SR. So there was just no reason to not have the cards, basically. And looking into the tournament itself, Sakazuki had like 41 decks for representation, and Enel had 15. In top 16, Sakazuki had 8, and then I think Enel had 5. So in terms of conversion rate, there's going to be more Sakazukis, but we're talking about a 20% conversion. And then for Enel, we had 5, which is a 33%. So it's 5 of 15, 5 for 15 conversion into top 16, followed by Enel winning. And in terms of deck representation, the field was nearly 3 times the amount for Sakazuki, so 41 to 15. And in terms of deck, what would you call it? It would be like deck representation, okay? And that is extremely telling of how strong Enel is as a deck in our meta. I don't know why Enel wasn't more prevalent in Japan. Maybe it was Purple Luffy, but I also see Purple Luffy just getting raffle stomped by Enel over and over again. Like when they play out Om Holy, you just generate a lot of pressure that basically says if you take life, this is going to go really south. Magellan is kind of a problem until they see Katakuri, and then they can, like, you know, place it in life. Double Magellan definitely hurts for sure, because having to out them at that point, like, you almost have to attack one of them and then go the minus Dawn, which is going to hurt your top end curve to regen life. But if they see double Magellan, that should be a pretty good game for Luffy. And they still have to minus Dawn and take life. So if you have a whole lot of Om Holies that have been established to the board, the Magellans won't really go for life. They'll have to kind of attack at those cards. And then simultaneously, if you defend those while generating that life and they put themselves behind in Dawn, they won't have enough for the top end to really finish you. And then you'll start to be able to focus, again, their life while simultaneously having that 4 or 5 life cushion, plus whatever triggers are going to trigger in there. And I say 5 life because you're going to get 1 back. And if they try to starve you out in the game, your top end, when it eventually comes, is just going to be too much, and you kind of like run them over. So I don't know why Japan didn't have a lot of NL representation, but for some reason it didn't. But when we look at the conversion rates and win rates of NL right now, we're talking 80% of the 5 tournaments that I just spoke about in reporting. Nothing else really major has come out since then. And the bottom line is that 80% win rate and a 33% conversion, where over half of the field was taken up by Sakazuki and the Heart Pirates. Like that, nearly half, I should say. So that is insane. Like that is absolutely absurd to consider for what the meta is for that tournament, and then it won. So to me, if you're looking to play a deck at Nationals, Enel should be the go-to. The Sky Island variant is definitely better than the Big Bomb variant because of the level of aggression and consistency at seeing that aggression. So Shura as a searcher is not only a trigger that plays itself that can search top 5, which is card advantage. To top it off, it simultaneously makes Om Holy more consistent, which is tougher for Sakazuki to out, as well as it's more pressure against your other matchups. And then 7-drop Enel on top of Om Holy is a colossal nightmare to see for Sakazuki, especially if they have the life to play back-to-back 7-drops. It's just going to be a real bad day. Rush is already a value that is really strong against Sakazuki. I had to think for a second, my brain just stopped. And with that Rush on top of the board state that could be created out of Om Holy, you literally drain their hand to nothing. Anything they swing with is just basically getting counter swung back. And the idea that you're never going to like be able to get rid of those Enels because they can trash life to protect it. If the board states not lethal to Enel, they'll just trash the life every time. Keep that card alive and then crack back at you again with 7k swings and just drain whatever counter you have out of your hand. So it's pretty problematic, right? The deck is pretty problematic. And if you have a high life starvation game and Enel doesn't have a lot of life missing, like if they have 3 life and Enel is on the board at that point in the game, it is kind of over. I just had a tournament where I went to in Indianapolis where the second round I played Enel, he tried the starvation game, and the real reason why the starvation game does not work is because of 10 drop Kaido. Okay. Now I saw 2 of them and I played both of them because I had the time and the blockers too. I was at 2 life when I had the one with 2 blockers up and he didn't have much of a board. And then I was at 1 life when I played the second with 2 blockers. So I drew 8 cards and he asked for a hand count at some point, and I said 14. Anything north of 10 at that point with both of those on the board is GG. So there was nothing to do. We talked about it for like 10 minutes after the game. There's this, but partially the tactic is to starve them to not give like attack counter into Sakazuki while being able to remove cards on your board. But you have to realize, right, if you are attempting to starve Sakazuki of resources, how can you starve them if you don't ever pressure them? It doesn't make any sense, because eventually what you're going to do is you're going to swing into them. They're going to spend the resources, which may cost them a card in value every turn or net them even, to get rid of your cards while generating other cards to the board. The longer the game gets, like Rebecca Hina starts to become a serious problem. Even if Kuzan's established, it doesn't matter because Rebecca Hina is still a threat, right? Because you'll still get that -4 value while generating a blocker. And it's something that you're going to have to deal with. And if you don't pressure your way through it, and the Sakazuki player just continues to get more Dawn to expand the resources in their hand to be able to get rid of your board, you're eventually just going to lose the game through the attrition war. Because the bottom line is when they play 3 cards a turn and can out your board, what have you done? If you've just established a bunch of cards that can't attack and you're trying to play catch up in the removal game, and then the next turn, like you play Katakuri and then they Ice Age Borsalino your card and you have no board, you're dead in the water. You're going to lose the game. Like, because you're not going to be able to remove all those cards. You're at that even, and here's the other thing. Let's say that you do have high life, right? Getting into the transition of the late game, Sakazuki at 10 Dawn, if it's safe for them, if they have 3 life left or 2 life left in a blocker or 2 and they play 10 drop Kaido, you might as well forfeit the game. There's nothing that you're going to play that doesn't instantly die, and there's nothing you can turn sideways that 10 drop Kaido isn't going to immediately feast on. It's that serious. 1, you don't have anything to out it. 2, if you turn your cards sideways, if I have blockers on the board and you then I'm gonna invest like 7 Dawn, swing 16 at the 12 Kaido, and I have a Rebecca blocker, that's the easiest block in existence, unless it's gonna somehow get me killed, right? Which it probably won't, because I play 10 Kaido and I either have the cards to counter out or I could just block. And it starts to build up this spiral out of control, where again you just fall over eventually to 10, 12k beat sticks just being turned sideways every turn. Because the bottom line is without blockers on the board, that's guaranteed damage. There's no way you're going to be comboing out of 12 in successive turns, let alone if there's 2 of them on the board. That being said, I still had to go through, I think, 13 life damage just to kill that Enel player. So with those Kaidos. And the scary part is that is the potential of Enel. The potential of Enel, if played correctly, has an extremely high ceiling with the Sky Island where you are just literally unkillable. And it feels really bad. The only way to really to handle it is to have the card advantage to be able to play and play beat sticks that their cards can't touch. So that would be anything 9 cost or higher. And unfortunately for Enel, that is literally like Sakazuki's best game plans. Even if they start like teching in a Mihawk or two, leader swing plus Mihawk gets rid of a Katakuri, which is pretty bad news. All that to say, Enel's got an insane win rate here in the West. It's got probably one of the most solid game plans for both going wide and tall, which is really problematic for Sakazuki. So that would be the best deck in order, in my opinion, for you to take to Nationals. You're going to need the reps with it. And if you would like a guide, I just wanted to say this in reference to like my earlier thank you. If you guys want me to do other guides just to see what I see with the deck and kind of talk about play lines and points of aggression, we can talk about that. And I can kind of demonstrate to you guys a little bit of this aggro philosophy that I think that a lot of people are not getting. Because in Sakazuki, pressure is the key, right? Because pressure before they can deal with the board is very problematic, okay? So just let me know. I can cover both variants, talk about the strengths and weaknesses of both. And it would be a fun video. In any other deck, red purple Luffy, red green Law, which that one I'm gonna be honest with you is a little bit tough right now because the only thing that the only deck that like truly like topples red green Law is Sakazuki, because it's forced to play a very weird game because of Rob Lucci. Like Rob Lucci, you see that twice. It's like an auto win very early. Like, it's really bad. All that to say, I'd be willing to do anything if you guys just want to leave a comment section down below on whatever deck. Red, purple Luffy, white beard, purple Luffy, I have it all. So just let me know, and I can I'll maybe try to put out a guide for Enel before Nats, because talking about this deck, obviously, I probably should, just to kind of help out. But if that's something you want, let me know. Moving on from Enel and being the best deck and the #1 deck I would take to Nats, let's talk about Sakazuki. I talk about Enel being gatekeeper. Sakazuki is the king, right? So he's sitting on the throne, and he's welcome to any challengers, and it just turns out that the gatekeeper at the door, Enel, kicked down the door and decided to assassinate the king, and he's like, I'm going to sit on the throne with my long ears and my little, like, drum Buddha crown thing behind him. Like, that's just, unfortunately, like, what Enel is doing right now. That being said, Sakazuki literally puts every deck in a bad position no matter what, because whatever value you're attempting to get out of the cards that you play to the board, if they don't have rush or generate you another card in hand, they're basically dead in the water. Like, just assume that they're gone. And that is really troubling for a lot of decks, unless there's some kind of inherent protection that can be afforded. And Rob Lucci is the primary culprit of that, like, underlying philosophy that you should just count them dead. Until you make them prove that they can get rid of the cards. And if they don't see the right cards, they don't see the right cards. And I think that's like one of the big problems with Sakazuki. So like Sakazuki is a little bit luck coupled with a high amount of skill, right? I say luck because if you don't have the right cards or you brick, which is unfortunate, back to that tournament in Indy, I end up beating the Enel player, and then I sit down at table 1 against another Enel player, and my game plan is going flawlessly. I'm right in the position that I want to be. I have 2 life. I have a blocker. If I see a 10-drop Kaido here, I win, and I move my 2 Dawn over for 10. And I don't know how this happened, but my 2 10-drop Kaidos were stuck to my Dawn. So I had an insufficient deck, and I technically was disqualified from the round. It was a game loss, and like it's so random, because the way that I put my deck in the deck box is I have deck, leader, Dawn, so that can never happen. So my Dawn can never be inside of my deck space whatsoever, and I don't know what happened. I literally don't know how that happened, and it was the most unfortunate loss that I've ever experienced in my TCG career, because I've never ever, like, I've played Yu-Gi-Oh, I've played Dragon Ball, I've never had an insufficient deck anywhere, and I've never cheated to win anything. So it's just terrible. Like, it was honestly just bad. And I felt really, really terrible because my opponent basically did everything that I would want him to do, which is play a bunch of cards and not do anything with them. And then if I see 10 drop Kaido with my 2 blockers on board, by the time that we get to, my 10 Dawn turn, I play Kaido and just win the game on the spot. Like, there's no point of recovery. I get a free 5k swing at life. I get to do what I want, either take a card out of hand or make them take a life and then make them replay, invest an entire turn into Yamato and then have them turn all their cards sideways. And now whatever card they turn, I basically get to attack a leader, attack with the Kaido and block up with whatever, and then replay cards and then minus and get rid of their cards. And I was so mad. And that turn following, right, that game following that one, after I lost by insufficient deck, which was just super unfortunate. I mean, nobody wants to be like, yeah, dude, you took 2 cards out so you could, slide them into your hand. You couldn't be more obvious, like moving your Dawn off and then seeing 2 of your secret rares that you won in your hand. Yeah, so, like, if anybody comments that I was trying to cheat, like, please stop. I've never cheated in an entire game of TCG in my entire life. But it was so unfortunate, and my opponent was looking forward to a good game. He thought it was unfortunate too, because it was honestly a really good game, but I was in the position to win it. The next game that I played, though, in round 4 was against Purple Luffy, which is honestly a pretty good matchup depending on what they see. And he saw double Magellan, and 4 out of my 4 life were all, like, non-counter. So I lost. I had 6 cards in hand with no counter. It's an unfortunate thing. Like we talked about with Sakazuki, right? Over 50% of your deck is non-counter, so it's going to happen, right? Just unfortunate that it happened that way. We did a rematch, and I floored him. I think I had, like, 2 life left when he lost the game. So it's, like, one of those things where it just depends on what they see. He was able to counter out of all my attacks early, not take a lot of damage, and then use his life as a resource to ramp to keep on curve with the Magellan plays and then double Magellan. And even though I could out both of them, by the time I did, he was still able to see the Kaido, and it was just too much. And I had to fold, especially with the low counter in hand. And feels bad, but it is what it is. But that can be a thing. Sakazuki can break, have low counter in hand. And on top of that, it could just not see the cards in the right matchup. There's the skill knowledge of every matchup that you have to have before it. Going into what your game plan is, what cards you want to see, what cards you don't want to see, what's going to be important to keep, what's important not to keep, and then crafting those turns is a lot to juggle for new players, especially ones unfamiliar with the deck and what it does, or unfamiliar with the matchup and how to play it. So there's a lot going for that, and that's kind of like the last aspect, like the player skill. And all those are reasons why I think that, like, Enel is a lot more solid of a choice, just because if we do value them at, like, the same tier or Enel slightly better, you're gonna be able to say that, like, Enel's skill ceiling is like the skill floor is a lot lower, and its ceiling is still pretty high. And there's a lot of micro decisions that can be made, but it's easier to do because it's not as relevant to optimizing the best cards in your hand to deal with whatever your opponent has. So moving on to what would be the pros of it, though, mass removal to everything your opponent does. If they 1-for-1 trade per turn, like they play 1 card, like that is not going to fly, fam. It's just not. If it doesn't have rush on it, it isn't going to do anything. It can establish very good defensive board states, and then by 10 cost Kaido is broken because it's 4 more resources, either to defend themselves or to help get resources that will then out your board. There just isn't a lot to say. Sakazuki is that good. It's just that good. And it all depends on, the player, the matchup, the cards. And if it all goes well, you should win just about every game, unless the opponent's opposing aggressive strategy just destroys you. So, Moving on to the third best deck, it's not Purple Luffy for me, it's Katakuri. And even though Purple Luffy does play well into Katakuri, Katakuri still has a lot of things that it can do. Number one, it's really strong into Sakazuki. More so, I think, than Enel out the box, because it doesn't need as much high roll randomness with like Ohm Holy, but it does have quite a lot of problematic cards. So 10 cost Mom is a serious problem for Sakazuki. If you have 2 life and they are healthy enough to be able to play 2 10 cost Moms, you've lost the game, right? My golden rule is they can take 1, but they cannot take 2. If they take 2, it's bad. Especially if they see 7 cost Mom, trashing a light, like trashing that plus 1 big Mom can be enough. Like 110 drop big Mom can be enough. So it's something to watch out for in the matchup. And swinging 7 taxes the 2K counters out of hand every turn. However, that's why you end up taking that life, because eventually when 7 costs, like if you're at 1 and they play 7 cost Mom, just grant them a life. It doesn't matter as much. What matters is that they invested $7 into that, and then you get rid of the 7 Mom while crafting a board that's defensive, right? And then like you defend like the 7K swing, and then like the 8 drop Katakuri might give you a life or something. And if that's the case, and they like put a card back in your life and they swing, take the life, right? Go back down to 1 so that the 10 cost Mom can hit 1 card. But when they go to invest into that turn, they basically can see that the only thing they're going to swing with is the leader on board, because hopefully you're getting rid of those cards every turn. If they high roll multiple, and this is where it gets a little bit iffy, but like if they high roll like a Cracker, a Sanji, or a Parasparrow out of life, it starts to get a little bit complicated. You need a Hound's Blaze or Borsalino with bottom deck the Parasparrows. Don't give them the extra 2K counters in hand to be able to defend later. Even if you can Rob Lucci it, if you can Rob Lucci 2 other cards and just get rid of those and then swing 5s at them if you seriously need to get rid of the Parasparrows. Don't give your opponent value of plussing a card off of the removal of Lucci if you can. Avoid it, because that's what they want. That card dying does not matter to them, right? It only matters to them if it's the only card left on the board to swing with. So get rid of everything else if you can. And then proceed to get rid of it. If you see Brenu opening and there's a Hound's Blaze, Parasparrow does not matter. You'll just leader swing at life. And then if they Thunderbolt your Brenu, oh, big deal. And then Hound's Blaze the card away. Don't give them that attacker. So yeah. But that being said, 1 good life trigger is enough for Katakuri. And unlike Enel, who just eventually like sacks their way into triggers by regenerating a lot of life or putting them back into life, unfortunately, Katakuri gets to choose which cards go where. So you're going to be affected a lot more by triggers that are in the life than you would against Enel, unless Enel just goes through so many life to be able to see it. And 10 cost Mom is 10 cost Mom. You have a leader that swings 7 every turn potentially. You have 10 cost Mom. You have Gadatsu on curve, which is really nice. And then you have Parasparrow, which is an aggressive piece that's going to regen you a card unless it's bottom decked. So there's just a lot going on in Katakuri that is really problematic for a lot of people. And for that reason, I think that it is my number 3. Number 4 is going to be Purple Luffy. Purple Luffy, as I've talked about in previous videos with it, if it sees the curve of ulti, page 1, poly into 9 Kaido, if none of those cards have been gotten rid of, either through saving them or through attacks or by removal, you're going to steamroll any opponent. Double Magellan against yellow is like disgusting. It's disgusting against Sakazuki as well. Just in general, being able to remove 2 Dawn, and against matchups that can't get rid of anything that aren't KOing, those Magellans are just basically free real estate until 8 Dawn for Katakuri or Enel to be able to play the 8-drop Katakuri to put it into life, because there's no way that yellow can win any game if they lose 6 Dawn. There's just no way yellow can win any game that way. So those cards are free real estate. Setting your opponent back at Dawn every turn in curve, or a whole turn back eventually through double Magellan in the matchup can be huge. And to top it off, if you're able to defend your life as a resource and use it as a hand replenisher and options plus ramp, to be able to like widen your plays for the turn. If that's the kind of game plan you can play against yellow, you're going to see a lot of success. The same thing applies to Sakazuki. And then once they get to Tendon, we always talk about the Kaido coming down and having a lot of impact, because it is going to be a challenge for yellow to remove the card. They basically have to swing into it. The issue is that if you can get Luffy in a pretty low life position relatively early, before the 9 Kaido comes down, the ramp from the leader starts to get a little bit dangerous. If you play against Enel, for example, with Purple Luffy, and they can high roll the Ohm Holy before you get a chance to play Magellan, and they get those 2 cards established, and then you Magellan them, and then like the next turn they play like Gadatsu or something else, it's going to be a very bad day, because that's a lot of pressure coming at you that Magellan's going to have to crack back at, that they can pretty much easily defend unless you're going to invest all of your cards into a swing to get rid of their cards, because they'll defend them. Especially if they're at 2 life. Ohm being a 6k is very easy to defend, and then at 5s, your 6k swings still get 2k countered out, and if they protect those while having Gadatsu, and they have 3, 5, 6k swings or a 7-drop Enel swing coming at you as well after the Gadatsu play, it's a bad day. So that being said, Purple Luffy is a little bit of a high roller, but it is what it is. My favorite deck next is to talk about to play at Nats is actually Red Purple Luffy. Red Purple Luffy is probably one of the most slept on decks in the game, because it is one of the few decks that once you're put in a specific position, you must have specific cards. They may not even matter, or you die. If you have no blockers when you're at 1 life and they have 10 Dawn, like, it's a very bad day. It's a very bad day. And they can be at 10 Dawn when you're at 8. And on top of that, they can play a 9 Beard at when you're going into 8, if they see the ramp properly. So how does that work? Let's say they go first, they play Nami, then they play Zorojuro. If you don't out that, next they go to 5 when you're at 4. Now Zorojuro puts them at 6, and then you go to 6, and then they go to 8, and then they can ramp to 9, and then you have a 9 Beard play on their curve properly, and you have an 8k swing and then a 10k swing coming on the next turn. And then when you go to 8, you do what you do. And then if you can't get rid of the 9 Beard, now they could either do one of 2 things. Depending on their hand and life state, they could proceed to play another 9 Beard, which is now going to be an 8-10 swing. And if they have 2 9 Beards living into the subsequent turn of that, because they'll be able to easily defend their life, you hit them one time, they have Rad Beam, they're at 10 Dawn, they're going to have the ability to have that 1-up for the Rad Beam, and they're an 8k leader. You're probably not going to kill them through 6 or 7 cards with a Rad Beam behind it. There's just nothing you can conceivably play that's really going to affect them. And then you have 10k, 10k, then 7, if they have their take a turn Luffy, 10k, 10k, 7, followed by another 12, and then, or 10, or 15. And then Diablo Jambe can make it a 15 unblockable. So that's bad news for a lot of decks. You just high roll ramp into that. And then it can also play defensively with, at 10 Dawn, with like, Kid into Queen, get them some life back, have a couple blockers, and a Dawn up for Rad Beam, which is just absurd. So I think a lot of people are sleeping on that, because unless Zorojuro gets outed at that one point, right? Like if Zorojuro gets value one time, or they like life a Basil Hawkins or hard play a Basil Hawkins, it's absolutely terrifying. That deck goes from ramping one time, it goes from okay, like curve, let's see what they can do, to outright scary. And even if they see at 8 Dawn, you ramp up into 9, they see 7 Cost Kid into 9 Beard, a 9K leader, like, again, same position. There's no way at 9 Dawn, at any Dawn, no matter what it is, that you're going to be able to kill Red Purple Luffy through a Rad Beam at 9K power. There's just nothing that you can do. You're going to attempt to starve them, and you better have like high cost attackers because you're never attacking them. And then even then swinging at the kid is an 8K. So it's the same thing as essentially defending your leader if it was only 9 bearded. And then if they have the 8K swing, the 10K swing, and the take a turn Luffy, it's the same scenario that I painted minus the 2K power that it's going to take to defend against the 8, right? So because if you're a 5 life leader, instead of being 10 and requiring another 2K to go up all the way to 11, you're going to be able to counter out at 9. So there's just this pressure state that if the deck semi-rolls well at all, and I mean like at all, like if it sees 1 Basil Hawkins or it sees 1 Zorojuro, it's curtains. Like it can literally be curtains for certain deck. In fact, Red Purple Luffy feast on any deck that has 4 or less life. Period. It's 1 less life they have to go through. In the Purple Luffy matchup, they take it 1 time. It's bad news. And as for the whole like Magellan thing, Magellan is strong in the sense that like, yeah, you'll be able to take care of their Dawn and put their curve back a little bit. But if they see multiple cards if they see Zorojuro and you commit Magellan and then swing into Zorojuro and they defend it with a 2K, then your Magellan is negligible. It doesn't matter because Zorojuro got value twice. So yeah, it's just one of those things where you kind of have to watch out. And if you had to take a life to keep your Dawn up for Magellan, it's just going to be a bad day. And then eventually Purple Luffy is going to have the ability to free ramp their Dawn at 8 and make the Magellans not matter in the end. So, but for that, coupled with Diablo Jambe, I would be looking at my number 5 deck probably to be Red Purple Luffy. And I was really high on Whitebeard, but I think that the problem with Whitebeard is that he takes his own life. And as the game state progresses, and yes, you're getting those 2 draws a turn, essentially, and making Gadatsu way worse in the yellow matchup. The problem is crafting enough rush attacks properly against yellow's triggers. And playing around a lot of triggers can be pretty problematic. And then not having like a stable board state is at times a little bit of a problem because do you defend the cards on the board or do you defend your life later in the game? And that's always something that you have to like kind of gauge. It really depends on like what your opponent does. Like if they play a card first and then like they play like an Ohm Holy and then they try to get rid of your board, it kind of might be a little bit iffy. So just something to kind of like consider. But Whitebeard, while having, I think, a strong presence against every deck in its game plan, sometimes just falls a little bit short, and I'm not really sure how to solve that. I'm not sure like what I could put into the deck to help boost it up over the edge in the matchups that it sees. I've played Whitebeard against my friend Oscar twice, and I've been 9-bearded 3 times in tournament, and I've been 9-bearded 3 times in both games, and I still won with Sakazuki. So it's a little tough, right? Like I'm not sure what could have gone a little bit differently in order to make that matchup not as tough. But the second game was a lot closer. First game was a lot more impressive, but the second game was a lot closer, where I only won, it was 1K off. Like if he had a 2K instead of a 1K in any of the positions that he had, he won. So yeah, I played absolutely out of my mind for that second game as well. But I think the first one was more impressive. All that to say, Whitebeard has some weaknesses that I'm not really sure how to overcome for the meta. I'd have to look at some lists to see what other people are doing. Another deck that I think that people should consider to play is probably Red Purple Law. It's going to be a lot harder because that's another pretty skill-intensive deck to play, because you basically have low hand resources, and it's about optimizing, again, what you have. But there are a lot of pluses. Red Purple Law has a lot of distinct play lines that are pretty problematic for Sakazuki. Fire Fist is insane because unless they play Sabo, basically you can KO Rebecca and make Borsalino a 2K. So the blocker is going to die to whatever aggression is there. And even then, you can then bottom deck the Borsalino with the leader effect and just remove 2 blockers in 1 turn. So it's pretty nuts. What Red Purple Law can do. In addition, with a 5-cost kid, refunding a Dawn back for the Dawn minus effect is nuts. There's just not a lot to say. I think the deck has an insane presence and can put even Sakazuki in a lot of bad positions that it's not very comfortable with and doesn't want to be in. So I think that Red Purple Law could be a pretty good thing to look at. And anything that applies to what I'm talking about with Sakazuki, basically for Red Purple Law, applies to every single other deck. Like Sakazuki, Red Purple Law doesn't care what you do or play. It's going to focus on maintaining its tempo swings and playing 2 cards a turn, 2 cards a turn, 2 cards a turn, go wide. Its biggest deficit is that it doesn't have a lot of hand advantage, which can be compensated a little bit with its like taking life and then seeing queen. Especially if you're able to establish a 5-drop kit and play a queen, you start to see a lot of value. But then the 4-cost law blocker can be played from hand, so if your opponent does have high hand size over you, you can kind of even the playing field. And then again, that blocker with the queen is just also absurd. Like, imagine a turn where you can play 4-cost queen, Dawn -3, refund 1 back, and play the 4-drop blocker, and rip 2 cards. Like, that's pretty nuts. It's pretty nuts double blocker play, and then like you're kind of defended. And then Zoro and Red Green Law, both of them are very powerful aggro decks. Zoro more so than Red Green Law, but I feel that Zoro he's kind of down bad right now because unlike Red Green Law, he can't just hold his cards in hand. He kind of needs to play them to generate advantage and then get advantage off of the pressure swings that it can generate to the board and the value that it gets out of it. So if you were asking me, it should be Enel, Sakazuki, Katakuri, Purple Luffy, Red Purple Luffy, then you can mix it up between Whitebeard, Zoro, and Red Green Law. An honorable mention for a deck that you should take the Nats if you have the patience to play it should be Queen. Queen actually grinds extremely well into Sakazuki, like extremely well, because basically they can defend their life till they get to a low hand. The John Giant is actually a pretty good replacement for Katakuri, although you're not getting as much value out of the John Giant as you would with like putting like a Brule or a Sanji back into your life with Katakuri. It is a card that has counter while facilitating the leader effect, and it's an 8 for 10. So you have a card that can be countered, which at times, if it's bad, like Katakuri would brick, and so you don't have the hand to be able to activate the leader effect to regen a life. And John Giant being a counter, it can do that, and the presence of him being a 8 for 10 is pretty good. You do lose a little bit more removal with the Katakuri, but sometimes countering in hand is best with Queen so that your life to hand ratio is low enough to be able to activate the Queen's effect. That in addition with the X-Drake blocker, basically giving them now 3 targets to top 5 organize their life for Queen effect. Draw, charge, draw, charge, or charge, draw, charge, draw, charge, draw, depending on the attack pattern of Queen, could really, really put your opponent into some bad positions. Because if you want to talk about Saki triggers in yellow, which there's a lot of complaining about that, like, oh, I would have beat Enel or I would have beat Katakuri if they didn't hit the 3 billion bolts of Mario when Enel had taken his second to last life and activated effect and just went back up to, this is so stupid. It's like, that's why they run 3 or 4 of them in a deck. Or Thunderbolt, the same thing. Like, if you walk into a Thunderbolt against Katakuri and Enel, it's just like, well, you should have expected it at this point. And if you're complaining about triggers now, and, you know, I'm not trying to, like, call anybody out. I know that in my guide, I seem a little bit aggressive against, like, people that I disagree with or things that they do that I disagree with. I don't mean to come across that way. I try to be as humble as I can and say, this is my opinion or things like that. So if you felt that way, I apologize. But when it comes to complaining about the entire thing that yellow does, which is trigger out of life, I just don't know what to tell you. When, you know, if they high roll 5 triggers in life, it's what they do. It's what their deck is designed to do. When they play 30 triggers in their deck, that's what the goal was to start. And simultaneously, like, if you get those games where they see none of them, they brick and you just destroy them, right? Like, it's like 7 Mom, Katakuri, Yamato, and then some 3 billion Boltamaru back at their first life that they didn't want to pitch 2 cards out of their hand to do, and it just ends up being bad news bears. So, yeah, and it's only going to get worse in OP06 with the Onami, their ability to manipulate their life more, the whole 9 yards. It's just going to get way worse. And then when the new Luffy comes out, like the black-yellow Luffy, it's also going to get insane. So just anticipate that it's not going to get any better. And unfortunately, yellow dominating in the way that it is and winning the way that it is, I think a lot of people feel it a lot more. Whereas with Katakuri, they're like, oh, you know, they just won off the back of 10 Mom and it needs banned. And now it's like, oh, well, it's not 10 Mom really. It's actually the triggers all along that have been carrying them. And like a timed Beji just ruined the game for that other guy. But that's why they play Beji, so that eventually that card can come up and hopefully swing the game momentum into their favor to win. So, yeah, I just feel that it's not a Saki, and it's just a little bit what the decks are supposed to do at this point. So to me, I don't really complain about it. It is what it is. Try to play it around it as best you can. That's all I can say. You know, and I talked a little bit about this in the Sakazuki guide. Like, don't come in a card to board against yellow if you have a swing at their life, and then swing accordingly, right? If you have like a Lucci on board and leader swing with Lucci first, so that if they do have a Thunderbolt, you still got the value out of taking that life, and they lose that Thunderbolt in hand, which is going to come up later against the Rebecca later in the game, and simultaneously your leader swing is still available for you to swing at their life with and then play your cards. Because if you play, like, if you swung Lucci and you play to Borsellino, then Borsellino's going to get Thunderbolted instead, so that it's not a blocker that they have to go through and they can get rid of it on your turn. So yeah, that is pretty much it for my meta-analysis. I think that Enel is the best deck, and those are the top decks that I think that you should be playing into Nationals. I overvalued Red a little bit, I think, at the beginning because of my poor analysis of just, I think, what Whitebeard would do. I thought Red would be a lot more dominant because of Whitebeard, and it turns out that he's not seeing the success rate that I thought that he would have. It's not that it's not good. Whitebeard is still probably better than 70% of the decks in the game. It's just that against the top tier decks, he's pretty much 50-50 even. And there's no definitive set of lines for him that just push each matchup over the edge. Like, if you get a lot of value out of your rush cards against Sakazuki, which is a totally fair thing that could go in your favor, because being able to rush them every turn is a really big deal, and reducing their blockers with Ace while being able to swing with Ace and Whitebeard is really strong, because it's basically saying that your Borsellinos and Salvos don't get a lot of value. There's just a point where, like, when you're grinding against them, at the later stages of the game with like 12 Kaido and everything else, Sakazuki just starts to feel a little bit more favored if they have like all the right cards. So yeah, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to solve it. Maybe it's the top end. There's a secret rare or a couple other tech cards that could be played in order to make it feel better. But right now it just feels kind of disappointing in the end. Not that it's not good, and you will flatten certain decks, but it feels like other decks are a lot closer. And then One more honorable mention that I want to throw out there, because if you're not playing Sakazuki and you run into this deck, it could be a very bad day for you, is Rosinante. Rosinante is insane. Rosinante, if Sakazuki did not exist, like I guess if Rob Lucci didn't exist per se, Rosinante could be like high tier 1, like right up there. But unfortunately, Rob Lucci does exist. And even though Rob Lucci is one of the weaker cards, it's not weak against the cards early. Weaker cards against the deck. In the late game, it's weak, but in the early game, it's insane. So that, I think that's partially why like Rosinante isn't seeing as many tops. But if you don't have removal, like bottom deck removal, like again, unless it plays against blue, Rosinante is absurd. Like absolutely bona fide, crazy, nuts absurd. Like he is so good. So that pretty much does it. I've talked about pretty much every other deck that I think that you should be looking to run into and that. And I wish everybody going good luck. Thank you again so much for all the support on my Sakazuki guide, comments on that, and my deck profiles. I really appreciate it. I love to see it. And please don't hesitate to leave me any more constructive criticism about any of my opinions or anything like that. I'm an open book, always wanting to discuss. And even the constructive criticism comments, I generally agree with you, right? Like if I said, you know, Hina's an auto cycle, and you say, well, there's times where I think that Hina's actually pretty good and it's this scenario, I'm going to probably agree with that. Like I could probably agree. And it's always interesting to see other players' philosophies and tech choices. So I look forward to, you know, making more content for you guys. Let me know about any of the decks that you want guides for, play curves, and how to play against every matchup. I can do that for any deck that you want, and I'd be more than happy to. And thank you guys as always for watching. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you're having a great new year, and you get to reach all your goals, as I said earlier, and I will see you next time. This is Marcus from TCG Discussions, signing off. Laters.